In our last video, we recognized that once we pulled our button widget down onto our activity here, that we got this explanation point. And the error is saying that this view is not constrained. So this button is not constrained. It only has design time, position. There's a lot of words there. So let me just explain what those words are saying. Here's what will happen. Go ahead, and I'm going to pause this so I can not, it takes a long time. But at this point, if you go ahead and run this application in your emulator. I'm going to do that. I'm going to put this on pause because it takes a while to do that. But go ahead and run this in your emulator and let's see what happens to our button. All right, so here is the this version in the emulator, and you can see that this button got shoved way up to the corner. In other words, it went to position 0, 0 of my application. And that's because we didn't properly constrain our widgets. So let's talk about what that means. And close this emulator. All right. So if you look in this component tree, we have what's called a constraint layout. And so all of our widgets are grouped into a container, for lack of a better word, and our container is the constraint layout container. And there's different types of layouts, but this particular one is designed, it's relatively new, and it's designed to try and position our widgets in such a way that they will be more responsive to the different devices and viewport sizes. And so let's see how that works exactly. So I'm going to click on this title widget, and you can see all of these squiggly lines that our button didn't have. I'm going to look in on our attributes pane here. I'm going to click on layout, and this is the layout for, and you can see it says Constrain widget. And so these squiggly lines are saying that these are kind of opposing forces. So the idea is that we have to have a horizontal constraint and a vertical constraint. In other words, approximately where shall we constrain this widget? In other words, this particular widget is, if we look at our layout pane here, this widget is constrained, or we're asking it to be centered horizontally, 50. You can see the 50 here. And then 16 down from the top. So if we drag this circle vertically, you can see here I'm attempting to center it, and the opposing forces are what those squiggly marks are. And the other alternative then is I can put it all the way at the top. Well, let's say we put it at the very top, and then we also have a margin. So margin says, let's do something really obvious. So we're going to go 32 from the top, and once we're 32 from the top, then this is how we're going to constrain it from the margin. So if we do 50, it's not actually 50 from the top, it would be 50 from after the margin is set into place. So this particular constraint is constrained horizontally and vertically from the sides of the viewport. So that's what we're doing on this particular one. So I'm going to slide this up a little bit. So if we click on our button, it says, and I'm going to look now back at that explanation point, it says the view is not constrained. It only has design time positions, meaning that when we're looking at our design view here, this is where we'd like it to be. We've placed it where we want it to look, but because it's not constrained, let's see, back to our, give me back because it's not constrained horizontally and vertically, then it'll jump back up to that corner position. So let's constrain our button horizontally and vertically. In other words, I can do like we did on this title. I can say, by clicking on these plus circles, we can constrain it horizontally and vertically. Because this is at 50, it's constrained to exactly be centered. We can also do that from the top and from the bottom. And so, oops, I missed top and the bottom. Okay. And so now what we're seeing is it assumed, well, first of all, by clicking on those, it assumed a 290 margin from the top. So if we put it at 0, now we can see that that's centered. Or another way that we can do this is I can drag this down. I'm going to click on my restraint and I'm going to delete it, this top constraints. Okay, and so now what I'd rather do is see these circles. So the circles say I can constrain this to another widget. In other words, now I'm dragging it to this title widget, and you can see that now I'm constrained from, so you can, this is very confusing to word. I'm sorry if this is making more confusing. So the point is I can either constrain a widget from, I need to constrain one horizontally and vertically, which is why we had that circle, but I can constrain it from in relation to or relative to the sides and the tops or to another widget. I can also pull this circle. You can see my little arrow. I can pull the circles and say I'm going to constrain it to the left and right sides. I lost that. To the left and right sides of a widget above me. So now I'm in relative to a element above me, I can constrain it that way as well. So you can see now that I've gotten rid of my explanation points and I've done two different types of constraints. This particular item is constrained in relationship to the edges of the viewport, and our button now in this example is being constrained relative to the title the title widget, the text view widget we set earlier. So you always have to constrain your let's go ahead and run it in our emulator. Okay, so now we can see that our button is constrained relative to the text view, and our text view is constrained as we set it relative to our edges.